Not long after I made my last video about Minoans mining copper in ancient Michigan, Eric at the Ancient Epoch handle on X posted a thread with some new information I wasn't aware of that might detail an ancient route from Britain to the Americas. He cited research from Dr. Minos Secretsis, a professor in Athens who analyzed a writing attributed to the ancient Greek writer Plutarch called On the Face Which Appears in the Orb of the Moon. I'll post a link in the description to the post. You can also find Eric on YouTube at the handle Ancient Hypothesis. But here is what the X post says. 1 out of 227 catalogues of Plutarch's grandfather, Lamprias, in which Lamprias asks Scylla the Carthaginian to narrate a story that he had heard from the servants of the temple of Kronos in Carthage. The story was originally told by a foreigner who was visiting the temple and came from a great continent. The recount describes accurate sailing directions on how to reach the American continent from Britain. Here is the account. Scylla, an island Ogygia, lies far out at sea. Distant 5 days' sail from Britain going westwards, and 3 others equally distant from it, and from each other are more opposite to the summer visits of the sun, and one of which the barbarians fable that Saturn is imprisoned by Jupiter, whilst his son lies by his side, as though keeping guard over those islands in the sea, which they call the Sea of Saturn. The great continent by which the great sea is surrounded on all sides, they say, lies less distance from the others, but about 5,000 stadia from Ogygia, for one sailing in a rowing galley. For the sea is difficult of passage and muddy through the great number of currents. These currents issue out of the great land, and shoals are formed by them, and the sea becomes clogged and full of earth, by which it has the appearance of being solid. That sea coast of the mainland Greeks are settled on, around a bay, not smaller than the Maeotis, the entrance of which lies almost in a straight line opposite the entrance to the Caspian Sea. Those Greeks call and consider themselves continental people, but islanders all such as inhabit this land of ours, inasmuch as it is surrounded on all sides by the sea, and they believe that with the peoples of Saturn were united. Later, those who wandered about with Hercules, and being left behind there, they rekindled into strength and numbers the Greek element. Then on the point of extinction, and sinking into the barbarian language, manners, and laws, was Hercules was the first honors there, and Saturn the second. But when Kronos comes into the sign of the bull every 30 years, they having got ready a long while beforehand all things required for the sacrifice and the games, they send out people appointed by lot in the same number of ships, furnished with provisions and stores necessary for persons intending to cross so vast a sea, by dint of rowing, as well as to live a long time in a foreign land. When they have put to sea, they meet, naturally, with different fates. But those who escape from the sea, first of all, touch at the foremost island, Greenland, which are inhabited by Greeks also, and see the sun setting for less than 1 hour for 30 days in succession. And this interval is night, attended with slight darkness, and a twilight glimmering out of the west. Having spent 90 days there, treated with honor and hospitality, being both considered and entitled holy, thenceforward they voyage home with the help of the winds. No other people inhabit the islands, save themselves and those that have been sent out before. It is indeed allowed to such as have served 13 years in waiting upon the god to return home, but the greatest part prefer to remain there, partly out of habit, partly because they have all things in abundance without toil and trouble, as they pass their time in sacrifices and hymn singing, or in studying legends and philosophy of some sort. Apparently the passage is longer, but Eric stops there and starts analyzing it in his thread on X. He maps it out and shows how a boat with oars could travel from northern Britain to Iceland in around 5 days, which, if they could do that, I think that would be the hardest part of the journey. Iceland to Greenland is a shorter distance, depending on where your starting point is from Iceland. The distance from Greenland to the American continent could vary quite a bit, based on where they decided to depart Greenland from and where on the continent they landed. You can go on Google Earth and map out possible routes and see for yourself. If they picked a good route, they wouldn't have to be in the open sea that long, and then they could make their way around to the Hudson Bay and just stick close to the shore for the rest of the journey into Canada and then to Michigan. So could the Minoans or the Carthaginians have made it to the Americas in ancient times? I think it's possible, and the route from Britain to Iceland to Greenland would have been doable. Would it have been easy? No, but doable. I mean, I can't really see myself hopping in a rowboat and rowing from Britain to America, but I can totally see some strapping young ancient seafarers doing it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the Minoans who did it. The more I think about it, the more I think maybe it was just part of some ancient trade network the Minoans were in. It might be more likely that some ancient Britons or Scandinavian people made the journey from Britain to America. We know Vikings made the journey at a much later period of history. Perhaps they were following an ancient route they had heard of. And Scandinavians would have been much more acclimated to the northern climate than Minoans would have been. And the Native American legend of the Michigan copper miners said they were fair-haired, which would more closely match Scandinavians than it would the dark-haired Minoans. So maybe the Minoans bought the copper off of someone else. Or perhaps they went on a joint venture with people who were already familiar with the route and acclimated to the northern climate. Hopefully they went in the summertime, though. It would be a difficult journey any time of the year, but at least it would be a little less difficult than going in the winter. So what do you think? Those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for listening.